We are back for week 3, already week 3. This is the War Room Sunday Morning Live Hangout. I'm your host, Jeff Ratcliffe, and with me, the mad genius of PFF, the numbers wizard, Mike Clay, and, of course, the incomparable Pat Thorman. Mike, what's up this weekend?
Oh, not too much. Ready to roll here. Just kind of adjusting for all these injuries. So it's as usual. It's just a total pain to deal with all these guys just being deactivated on Sunday morning.
Absolutely, Pat. How you doing?
Yes, I'm doing great. Same kind of deal. Tweaking the rankings with the injuries coming out, and we haven't even gotten to 11:30 yet when the inactives will hit. So we got a lot to talk about.
Absolutely, and one thing to just sort of start the show off with, I did want to say, quick rest in peace to Rob Baronis. That was really sad news that came across the wire this morning with Rob Baronis passing away last night, a single car crash where his car lost control. A very, very bad incident. You never want to see these sorts of things happen, especially, just 36 years old. And of note, I did a little profile on Baronis for my Sunday morning column here. Baronis, a very impressive career if you start to look at the numbers. Number 7 overall in accuracy for kicking. He's the number 41 in terms of field goals made. The Robbie Gould is right on his tail, but a pretty impressive career. And again, haven't got a good one in Rob Baronis. Now let's get into the action for this week. And Kyle has been waiting patiently. Kyle, do you have your mic unmuted, and are you ready to ask us a question?
I think so, guys.
Awesome.
All right, so I have an auction, a fab auction that's going to go off at 10 a.m., and I need to pick up a defense for this week still because I actually dropped my defense on Wednesday and picked up Niall Davis. So my question is, to pick up that defense, would you recommend dropping Josh Gordon or my only actual bench wide receiver, Kelvin Benjamin, who I guess I could potentially need this week if Keenan Allen sits out? But I guess I am expecting Keenan Allen to play, but he is my only actual bench wide receiver at this point.
Wow, and that's your only option.
Yeah.
That's a tough call. Well, that's tough for me. It sounds almost like Allen's going to go. Are you able to pick up another wide receiver if Allen doesn't go, or are you stuck without a player if he's out?
Well, if I dropped Kelvin Benjamin and then Keenan doesn't play, I would be without a wide receiver then.
Okay,
yeah.
Then unfortunately I think you have to hold, which is too bad because I think you have to hold on to Benjamin, which is too bad because I think Gordon's a guy that could, if you get in the playoffs, could win you the league. Benjamin, I don't think so. But if you go, if you lose them 15 points this week, you may not make the playoffs anyway.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was leaning towards too. So.
Yeah, one quick question. Can you make a trade that would be in effect immediately? Potentially, if someone has 2 defenses and one of them has got a good matchup today, you can at least get your choice of defense that way instead of kind of picking up the dregs from the waiver wire.
Yeah, potentially I could do that. Yeah, they would go through in time. Yep.
Yeah, that's a tough situation. I'm sitting here pondering this. I don't know really how to approach it. So wait, you don't have a defense you can drop?
Well, no, I dropped the Tampa Bay's defense on Wednesday to just to pick up Niall Davis because I have JC, and it's a 2-quarterback league with I think 4 bench spots on me, so it's a little thin. And with Michael Floyd, Keenan Allen starting, Kelvin Benjamin is my only bench wide receiver.
Wow, that is a tough situation. Ooh. What is going on with the sound here? That is a tough situation there. I don't know exactly how I would approach that one. I wouldn't, I guess if it's me and I really feel like I have to hold on to Gordon, then yeah, I'm going to drop Benjamin. Benjamin is a swing or miss hitter. He's a home run hitter. He's going to make spectacular catches, and then you're going to throw it right to him, and he's going to drop it. And I think you're just going to continually see that throughout the course of the season. Obviously, if this is in a dynasty league, then maybe that is your best move. That's a tough one, though.
Yeah. All right. Thanks a lot, guys.
Did you have anything else for us today?
No, I think that should be it.
Cool. All right. We have Bob on, and it looks like Bob's just asking in the chat, so maybe we'll get to his real quick, and then we'll possibly head over to some stuff on Twitter. He's asking for a PPR RB2, and he's between Justin Forsett and Trent Richardson. Michael, toss that one over to you first.
Forsett or Trent Richardson? I'm going Forsett today. I mean, we know this is a guy that's not going to come in there and be a feature back. But, I still think he may see 55, 60% of the carries, and he's going to see a lot of targets. We know that probably in the 3 to 4 range. You can safely guess, maybe even more than that if they end up falling behind at Cleveland today, which is not as easy as a matchup as it might have been in the past. So, I think Forsett's going to be on the field a lot. I think Taliaferro is going to probably see an 8 to 10 touch range today. But I think Forsett is the guy in that backfield, probably a back-end running back 2 option. So I would go with him over an ineffective Richardson for sure.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think T-Rex should actually have a decent game today. Game flow will be in his favor. You'd imagine. We'll ride him against getting gashed by running backs. But Cleveland as well. So first, it'll probably get an equal, if not higher, share of touches as Richardson.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with that. And with the news that Bernard Pierce here, obviously serious doubt, looks like a pretty good play. You have to be a little concerned about Ahmad Bradshaw if you're a Trent Richardson owner, so I'm going to go with Mike's call there and agree. All right, so let me see here and see if we can possibly get rid of some feedback. Maybe a headphone problem here. Are you guys still hearing feedback from me?
No, we're good, I think.
Yeah, we heard it when we were talking, or one of the guests were talking.
Okay, sounds good. All right, moving along. Looks like we don't have any questions in the chat or in queue here, so let's head on over to Twitter. We always have tons of questions on Twitter. Mike, any questions you have, maybe common questions you've been seeing so far this morning?
Yeah, lots of questions about Alfred Blue. So I think we should talk a little bit in general about where we think this guy fits. Going up against the Giants, this is kind of a tricky defense for me because last year the Giants' offense was so bad, people just kind of were like, well, that's a plus matchup. But the Giants' defense actually held opposing fantasy players in check pretty well on both the passing and especially on the rushing side of things. Now, they've struggled so far this year, so it's really hard to know what to expect here, especially when you go to Houston where it looks like Arian Foster's going to be out. So you have Alfred Blue, you have John Grimes there, who's is going to play some sort of role behind Blue, and you also have Ronnie Brown, who, say what you want about the guy, he's a terrific pass-catching back, and I think he's going to be on the field quite a bit today on passing down. So I'm kind of looking at Blue as maybe a borderline running back 2, probably best served as a flex or a running back 3, and the other guys would probably stay away from. But there's some appeal just because Houston has been historically run-heavy so far, and if they can get the lead on the Giants, you may see Blue be kind of one of them sleepers for 20-some carries this week. So really a tricky situation there in Houston, but if Foster's out, Blue's the only guy worth considering.
Yeah, and absolutely you have to consider this also on the Giants side of the ball. John Beeson hurt again, go figure, and they're going to have, a relatively good run stopper in Jameel McClain in the middle. But that's still a serious downgrade there, and having to roll out possibly Spencer Pasinger, possibly Mark Herzlich. The Herzlich, I really don't expect to see him. He's more of a middle linebacker. But there is plenty of opportunity for yards here. It's really a shame if Foster doesn't go, and it doesn't really sound promising. Pat, any thoughts on the Alfred Blue scenario?
No, I'm with you guys. I think it's a situation to avoid entirely. Unless you're desperate, and Alfred Blue would probably be your guy. I would imagine most Arian Foster owners are the ones asking that question. The Giants have given up some on the ground to Bell and Bush and Ellington, but they're still a pretty highly graded run defense. They were good last year, like Mike said. You probably have a better option on your bench for more guaranteed touches than these guys that could be a three-headed monster.
Now, Bob is still with us here, hanging out and chatting along, and he asks an interesting question here in a PPR. He's got 2 wide receiver spots, 4 wide receivers to choose between. Kelvin Benjamin, Michael Crabtree, Alan Hearns, and Greg Jennings. I think this one's pretty straightforward, but I'm going to toss this over to you first, Pat.
I'll take the first two. Benjamin's got the majority of the share there, and Crabtree's looking good, especially with Vernon Davis in doubt. His snap count went up to about 85% last week. He's starting to come on, and the other two have more competition for targets, not as good at passing games in general or quarterbacks. So I'll go with the first two.
Agreed, Mike.
Yeah, I'm going Benjamin and Crabtree as well. I actually think that if Hearns comes in here and he's listed as probable, so he's probably pretty healthy. If he plays full complement of snaps, I think he could put up wide receiver 2 or 3 numbers. It is a plus matchup, I think. But it's hard to know with him being hurt. So for me, I'm going to lean towards Benjamin and Crabtree today.
Yes, sir. All right, fairly easy decision there. And let's head back on over to Twitter while we're possibly waiting for some folks to show up and ask some more questions here. Pat, have you seen anything on Twitter? Common questions, questions that need answers.
Well, I got AJ Green or Reggie Wayne in PPR. And I'm
gonna go. I'll jump in. I'm going Green here. I do think Reggie Wayne has an outstanding matchup this week. I think he's going to put up wide receiver 2 numbers. But, A.J. Green is what he is. If he plays, and, it doesn't seem like there's very much doubt. There was early in the week, but late in the week it seemed like, he's good to go. So even up against Tennessee, I think you have to use A.J. Green and treat him as a top, a wide receiver 1.
Yeah, I have 2 words for that one, too. Brandon Marshall. The guy's hurt, doesn't matter. These guys, if they get on the field, they're going to play. I mean, it's not that scenario like we would have seen, possibly in the past out of Roddy White, where he goes out and kind of, he's a decoy or whatever. AJ Green's not going to be used as a decoy. If he's out there, you're starting him, especially over Reggie Wayne. All right, let's see. Any other common questions we have coming across the wire here on Twitter or elsewhere, Mike?
Let's see here. What kind of of course, now I'm catching the easy ones like Niall Davis or Chris Ivory. Obviously, we're going to go Niall Davis on that one with Jamal Charles out and Davis a borderline running back 1. I think you guys would agree on that one. Let's see. How about this is a pretty good one. 2 of the hottest tight ends right now. Delaney Walker.
Where he goes out and kind of, he's a decoy or whatever.
All right.
Sorry about that.
Getting feedback there. Delaney Walker or Antonio Gates today?
Ooh. Well, Gates has the better matchup, although Cincinnati's got a linebacker injury, and Vincent Ray is going to be stepping in. But Buffalo's been getting gashed by tight ends. And Gates is obviously hot after scoring 3 touchdowns against Seattle last week. So I think Gates is a solid call on that one.
Yeah, I mean, that one's a little bit closer, I think, possibly for me. You're looking at a situation where he may face some tough coverage, and that sort of proverbial letdown game could be a potential. I think this one is, this is a perfect start-sit dilemma. I might lean Walker. I know that's kind of crazy to think after a game like Gates had, but let's not forget Walker has certainly been the apple of Jake Locker's eye, and I do like the upside that he certainly offers there. I don't know. The San Diego-Buffalo game is a really tricky one, and I'm trying to avoid it unless I'm talking on the IDP side of the ball. I'm avoiding it in a lot of situations I've noticed in my lineups.
Yeah, I'm going to go Gates here. I think Gates is a top 5 option. He's, last year he was the number 9 fantasy tight end, and we kind of all just assumed he was going to drop off Ladarius Green to pick it up. Well, Gates is right back at it. He looks like a top 10 fantasy tight end again, maybe with even more upside since, he's catching touchdowns. So I think he is a better bet than Delaney Walker. That being said, up against Cincinnati, I think Tennessee's going to struggle to score, and pretty much all the wide receivers across the board have tough matchups. And I'll since we're kind of covering that, I'll convert that right into the next question, which I was going to say was Jeremy Hill or Kendall Wright. A lot of weeks that may seem easy, Kendall Wright, especially in PPR, but this week I am way down on Kendall Wright, and that's hard for me to say because I drafted him a lot. I thought he would do more downfield, get more touchdown opportunities this year. so far, not really seeing that, although he scored once. This week Kendall Wright has Leon Hall, and if you look at the numbers, our new wide receiver cornerback chart here at PFF, we see that Kendall Wright lines up in the slot 83% of the time. Leon Hall is in there 74% of the time. Leon Hall is a tough matchup for opposing wide receivers. So Nate Washington, Kendall Wright, they're going to have their hands full today. Justin Hunter probably has a slight advantage against Adam Jones. But that, with those tough matchups on the outside and in the slot, Delaney Walker, they see a lot of targets again this week. So it's I do like Walker top 10, but I think Gates the better bet there. And frankly, I'd go Hill over Kendall Wright.
Yeah, I want to piggyback onto that really quickly too, because I think the game script is going to go really well for Hill's fantasy stock here. I think we see a very similar game to last week. Lots of grounded pounds, and Hill, they're obviously confident in this guy, going to see plenty of carries. And we also saw in the preseason that, granted it was against number twos, but he's still capable of putting up a big game if he gets some volume. And by the way, just to also note, Vontaze Burfict is officially doubtful. I haven't seen anything saying that he's going to be out, but he's going to be out. He's not playing. That means Vincent Ray is going to be in there in place of Burfict, and Vincent Ray is not as strong in coverage as Burfict. Now, granted, Emmanuel Lamore is on the field, but that also bodes a little bit more positively for Walker. But yeah, it's going to be really tough to start Kendall Wright in this particular matchup. Now, we do have some folks joining us here. Let's start with Salvador. Salvador, you got a question for us this week? Possibly not. No, we're not hearing you right now. It seems like you're muted. If you just simply go up to the top of your screen, folks, there's going to be a little menu that comes up there. There's a little microphone with a slash through it. You want to just do that. Also, sometimes your computers may not be enabled. Your microphone might not be enabled for Google Hangouts. I'm not exactly sure why. It is something you can go in and change. Don't ask me how to do that, though, because I don't really know much about that. While Salvador's figuring it out, let's see. Do we have Justin? No, it looks like you're muted. How about Jimmy? Jimmy, you with us? Now Jimmy's muted. All right, we have some questions over in the chat. So we'll hit these up first. In a standard scoring league, do we like Fred Jackson, Justin Forsett, or the aforementioned Jeremy Hill? So standard scoring, Fred Jackson, Justin Forsett, Jeremy Hill. I'm assuming we're choosing one. What do you think, Mike? Is Mike muted?
I can hear you.
Mike, I think you are muted.
Yep, I was muted. Okay, so let's try that again. I like Forsett. I think it's an easy call here. Maybe Fred Jackson, someone in the conversation against San Diego struggling against the run through 2 games. You don't want to put a ton of stock in that, but I think Forsett, it's going to be a relatively competitive game in Cleveland. I think that Forsett's going to be on the field quite often today, and that also that is assuming Bernard Pierce is out, which it looks like he will be.
Thoughts on that, Pat?
I'm with Mike. I'm kind of off Fred Jackson until I see him get a little more of the share of the passing game. Last year he was way up there with passing targets, passing downs, and he's markedly lower that way. So until we see it with Fred, we kind of got to assume that he's a little bit less involved than last year.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to agree on that one. We have a interesting question, more of a long-term, based on what we saw on Thursday night, so I want to knock this one out real quick. Dealing with Vincent Jackson, the question essentially is, does this guy have value moving forward, or should the Jimmy Joe here drop Vincent Jackson? I'm going to take the lead right away on this, and obviously you can't really make too many conclusions based on Thursday night's game. He saw 9 targets, or 9 or 10 targets off the top of my head. Obviously not catching very many of those. Partially Vincent Jackson's fault, partially both quarterbacks' fault, and partially the result of Robert Alford being awesome in coverage. He was all over Jackson in that game. I don't think this is an indicator going forward. I'm not dropping Vincent Jackson. Do you guys disagree, or are you agreeing with me?
I certainly agree you can't drop him. And even trying to trade him at this point, I mean, unless you get pretty good name value in a trade, you kind of got to hold, because his value is most people would assume it's pretty low. And so now he's going to get Glennon. Glennon's going to have a full week of practice and a week in the game plan. And he was able to keep Jackson viable last year. So if anything, his arrow is pointing up compared to what it was last game.
Yeah, I'm obviously you're not going to drop Vincent Jackson. He's seen 30% of the targets so far for that team. That's a massive number, and with volume comes fantasy points. We know he's probably a top, we'll say conservatively, a top 15 talent at the wide receiver position, maybe top 10. He doesn't get really that credit, but he really is that good. So you got to stay put there. We saw him produce last year. It looks like Mike Glennon's going to get the nod for the next month, and maybe McCown may come back for a few weeks, and then it might be right back to Mike Glennon for the rest of the season if McCown continues to struggle. So I think there's a lot to like there. Buy low on him if you have him. Just hold tight. Next week, and I got bit by this last week saying that Torrey Smith had the edge on Ike Taylor, should have a big week against him. He did not, but that was just a product of the game plan there for Baltimore. Next week, Vincent Jackson will have Ike Taylor primarily in coverage at Pittsburgh. So he should have the advantage there and should be in for a good game. So hold tight on Vincent Jackson right now.
Let's chuck this back over to Salvador. You have the mic working now, my man? You don't have it working. Hey, you can actually, instead of trying to figure out all this tech stuff, just simply on the left-hand side of your screen, click the little speech bubble, and you can type your question over here in the chat, and we will definitely get to it. A better redraft stash, Pat and Mike, Lorenzo Taliaferro or Latavius Murray. Obviously some interesting upside with both of these players, but if you have to stash one in a redraft, which one are you stashing, Mike?
Well, this is kind of tricky because today both of these guys have a chance to emerge. Of course, Bernard Pierce on the fence of playing today, so Taliaferro is going to play along with Forsett, and in Oakland it looks like Maurice Jones-Drew's probably not going to go. So if McFadden, who's probably going to get the a bulk of the work there, if he gets beat up, which we've seen before, Murray of course gets to step up. But I'm going to go towards the more improved, or the guy we know a little bit less about, probably Taliaferro, the rookie. Some pundits out there really like this guy, think he has a chance to emerge into the starter, and I think he kind of has a clearer path with Pierce not looking so great, and whereas Oakland, they have these two veterans, Jones-Drew and McFadden, both of them would really have to be out of the way for Murray to take a feature-back job. So I'm going to lean towards Taliaferro. And just a side note on injured players, Arian Foster is actually running right now, and I know inactive starting to come in, but he just ran, they said, sideline to sideline, so he's not out for sure yet. We'll probably find out here in about 10 minutes.
Now, looks like we have Matthew on the line. Matthew, do you have a question for us?
You always think of the rookie quarterback, Derek Carr. He's kind of held up pretty well, right?
Coming in really low.
I surprised you with this because I'm getting to something.
Sounds like we're just getting a background.
Okay.
We're going to move on here and head on over back to the questions here. One more question from Kyle. He's obviously got I guess he has the Ridley reluctance. Maybe that's what we'll start calling it, because he says, do you have any strong feelings about Ridley versus Spiller in his flex? He said he's leaning Spiller. He doesn't want to get burned by Bill Belichick. And I think maybe we'll toss this over to the Patriots guy first. Pat, thoughts on how this might play out today? News coming that Shane Vereen is expected to play against the Raiders. But what are your feelings about this Ridley or Spiller?
Well, it's certainly a closer call than it seems just looking at these guys' names. The Chargers are obviously holding opponents to very, very low snap count. Spiller doesn't have a full workload in that offense. Ridley, at the risk of sounding stupid, guessing along with Belichick, it seems like a Ridley game today. The game script's going to be in his favor. He does well against bottom 16 rush defenses, whereas Vereen does better against top 16 rush defenses. They should beat the crap out of Oakland, to be blunt. In a non-PPR, Spiller is getting a bigger target share than he had last year. I'm going to side with Ridley on this. I hope he doesn't fumble.
Thoughts on that, Mike? Looks like you might have been muted again.
Yeah, I'm gonna go Ridley at home against Oakland. I think he'll get a lot of opportunities to carry the ball in the second half and definitely some scoring opportunities. So I like him over Spiller today going up against San Diego. And just to dive in, just to follow up what I just said, Arian Foster turns out, I guess it didn't go well in his warm-up. He is out today. Jordan Cameron is going to play, and Bernard Pierce is out. So, we mentioned Talaferro a little bit. He's a deep sleeper to watch. Justin Forsett on the running back 2 radar.
Yeah, there we go. So, and I'm going to have to side with the Ridley folks on this one. Again, Pat, you said it very well. It's going to come down to game script. In games where the Patriots are down, we see more Vereen. When they're up, we see more Ridley. I can't see how they're not up in this one, especially with the way their defense played last week, going against a rookie quarterback, going West Coast to East Coast. You really just have to like all of that for Ridley's chances. And again, hopefully he does not fumble in this one. All right, we're going to go to Jimmy Joe's question here with got Kyrie Robinson and Matt Asiata or Michael Floyd in a 0.25 PPR, so quarter of a point for a reception. He rated the waiver wire, it looks like, so he has a choice between Kyrie Robinson, Matt Asiata, and Michael Floyd. Mike, where are you going with this one?
I'm going to go, I think Floyd's going to have his hands full with San Francisco today, especially because Larry Fitzgerald has an A-plus matchup, maybe probably a top 5 matchup if you're looking at wide receivers against corners today. They're in the slot, and he had a great pair of games against San Francisco last year. I think Fitzgerald's going to be a top 12 fantasy wide receiver this week. So Floyd, on the other hand, I think is going to have his, like I said, his hands full on the outside. So I'm going to lean towards the running backs. I'm going to go Asiata. He's clearly the lead back in that backfield. He's struggling, so there's a chance McKinnon really gets in there and starts to steal some snaps, but it doesn't sound like that's going to happen quickly. So I think Asiata is the guy there. And Robinson, I just don't think he's going to see enough volume in the passing game with Pierre Thomas really taking on that role. So I think you're going to see close to 50-50, or maybe 40-40 with Javaris Cadet involved there. So I'm going to lean towards Asiata this week.
What's on this one, Pat?
Well, I agree with Floyd, unfortunately, because I'm a big Floyd guy, and things aren't going so well on that front. But I'm actually gonna go with Robinson over Asiata. I think Saints, they're 0-2. They're coming home for the first game at home. I think they're going to smoke Minnesota. They're going to be running down a lead in the second half. Robinson slides right into that Mark Ingram role. I would imagine we're going to see relatively similar numbers. Asiata is. They're like I said, they're going to get blown out. They're going to be throwing the ball around. We saw what happened to Asiata last week once they got blown out. It's certainly close, but I would roll with Robinson in this one.
Yeah, I'm going to break the tie. I'm going to lean towards Asiata. I've gotten a lot of questions about Robinson. He may be one of the most asked questions during the course of this week, and I'm proceeding with caution. I side with what Mike's saying here. We do have Cadet there, and hey, you never know. This isn't going to be a lock where they're taking their foot off the gas pedal and boom, there it's 25 carries for Robinson or something like that. No, I don't know if that's necessarily going to play out. I don't think we can bank on that in any way, shape, or form. Although I do think we are going to see a lot of Asiata. Now, again, it could be a 2-yard per carry Asiata, but still, we get that cheap touchdown in there somewhere, something like that. I do like his chances for that in this particular matchup. So I'm going to side with Asiata there as well. Now, in a TD-heavy league, we have a flex position between Shane Vereen, Justin Forsett, Mike Wallace, or Wheaton. So who are we going with that particular? Who do we think has the best chance to score a touchdown? I think ultimately is in this question here. Marcus Wheaton, Mike Wallace, Justin Forsett, or Shane Vereen?
We're just picking one?
It looks like we're just picking one, yes.
I love Mike Wallace this week. I think he's top 10 at wide receiver up against Kansas City, struggling secondary. For me, it's a no-brainer. You have to get Wallace in your lineup this week.
Yeah, I'm with Mike. I mean, he's getting plenty of volume. He's getting some red zone looks. Forsett would probably come in second here, but you don't necessarily anticipate him getting goal line carries. Taliaferro might get that. So yeah, Wallace.
Agreed. He's a player we talked last week. Don't underrate him. Yeah, maybe the deep field or the downfield chemistry isn't there between him and Ryan Tannehill yet, but they are feeding him the ball, and we're seeing what Wallace was supposed to be all along. So certainly agree with that there. We're finally getting to Salvador's question here. He has a PPR flex question, so it looks like he's between Andrew Hawkins or either Decker or Curley. I'm assuming that basically means you own both. If Decker doesn't give it a go, you're going Curley. So Hawkins seeing a lot of targets, 18 targets through the first two games of the season, 9 targets in each of those contests. So what are we doing with this one, Mike? Hawkins, or are we going to wait and go Decker Curley?
Wow, not much appealing there. It's too bad you don't have. I guess I would probably hold out on Decker here and just throw Curley in there if you have to, especially in PPR. But Hawkins probably not worth throwing in your lineup now. Might as well wait and hope Decker goes.
Yeah, I agree, especially with Cameron back. He's going to take away some of Hawkins' volume, which is obviously what he's existed on and why he's been viable to this point. Curley is obviously probably not the play over Hawkins 1-for-1, but the chance of getting Decker in there against Chicago, who struggled against the pass at times, I would wait it out.
Absolutely agree on that one, and just hope that Decker gives it a go. Though I do think Curley does see his share of targets, even regardless, but especially if Decker isn't in there. Let's go down to Josh's question here. Josh says he has good receivers. Well, that's good, certainly, but his running backs are a little bit questionable. Vereen, Reggie Bush, Asiata, Spiller, or Gerhardt, and he says, who does he start? Now, I don't have any information on how many, so let's just go with 2. If you're picking 2 out of those 5, Vereen, Bush, Asiata, Spiller, or Gerhardt, who are you going with, Pat?
Bush stands out for sure. I think that's going to be a shootout. It doesn't say if it's PPR or not, but I think he's still going to get enough of a workload that he'll be viable. And I'm going to go with Gerhardt. I think this is it's a good matchup for him. He's going to get plenty of volume. So I think this might be the week he kind of comes around. Looks like Austin Pastor is going to play, which is a big upgrade at right tackle for them, where they've struggled. So I'm going to keep rolling out Gerhardt.
Yeah, I'm definitely leaning Gerhardt as well. I've kind of been harping on this since the beginning of the week. I think this is really his opportunity. He's been getting a high volume of their carries. They just didn't run the ball at all last week. In week 1, he got hurt during the game and missed a chunk of that against an underrated Philly run defense. So I think he finally has that opportunity this week to, at home, first home game from Jacksonville, against a Colts defense that the Eagles kind of beat up on a little bit last week. So I think this is finally his week. And I'm going to go Shane Vereen, although it's close there with us, Asiata and Spiller. I think that Vereen, especially in the first half when New England's scoring points to get ahead, I think he's going to have opportunities. So I'm going to lean towards him. And just some news coming through here with inactives for people listening. Maurice Jones-Drew and Marquise Lee, as expected, both out. Keenan Allen, Deshaun Jackson, A.J. Green are all active.
Yeah, there you go. And by the way, just to highlight that Gerhardt play, I know he's scaring a lot of people. Jarrell Freeman not playing for the Colts. Josh McNary in there. Josh McNary, that was part of last week, part of why you saw what you did on Monday night. McNary not exactly a one-for-one replacement for Jarrell Freeman. So we should see a little bit better running out of the Jacksonville offense here, though that offensive line still does have a lot of work to do. All right, so we have several tight spots for our buddy Ray, and he's saying in the standard league he's going between Vereen, Asiata, and Cordero Patterson. Mike, who are you going with that? In a standard league, Vereen, Asiata, or Cordero Patterson? You're muted again there, man.
I keep muting myself because my computer's making noises, and I keep muting myself. I'm leaning towards. I'm going to go towards Patterson. I think that Minnesota, they should have thrown a lot. They should have been more effective last week. I really like Greg Jennings last week, and he bit me big time, although he just missed the touchdown. But Patterson, I think they've hopefully learned their lesson. You got to keep giving this guy the ball. He didn't have any carries last week after he had that long rushing touchdown in week 1. I just hope that Norv watched the film or thought twice about what he was thinking there and is going to get Patterson more involved. The Saints tend to give up plenty of yardage to pass catchers. and especially if they get the lead as we expect them to, Minnesota's going to have to throw a lot of football. So I'm going to go towards the high ceiling here with Patterson.
Pat, thoughts on this one?
Yep, I agree with that. Especially after, like Mike said, he got 0 carries last week. Yeah, I would have put the over/under on his carries this week. It's got to be at like 4 or 5. They're going to have to get him the ball. He's the only playmaker they really have anywhere near their backfield. Kyle Rudolph didn't look great last week either. And since it's a standard league, he probably has the best shot of having a touchdown as well.
Yeah, and you look at this, okay, Asiata, low ceiling, Vereen possibly a higher ceiling, but the highest ceiling out of all of them is Patterson, and a decent floor, though they just have to get this guy the ball. I mean, I can't see how you don't give this guy plenty of touches in this contest here, and he's the type of player who we know he can make your fantasy week in one play. That's all it takes, so certainly going with him there. There's still more to the story, though, for our buddy Ray. In a PPR, he's going between Ivory and Vereen. I think this one's pretty straightforward. Any disagreement that it's Vereen in that case?
Vereen.
No disagreement. I mean, I like Ivory. I like his matchup, but especially in PPR, Vereen.
And then he, in a standard league, has Cooks or Wallace. I think we can all agree that it's Wallace there. So we're just going to move on. And I have to highlight this question because this is how you never expect these sort of questions to come about. It's week 3, and we get this question: do I start Tom Brady or Kirk Cousins? And it's like almost mind-boggling to think that is a question, but it almost is a viable question. I highlighted in one of my columns for this week. Tom Brady has the second lowest completion percentage. The only one out of the 2-week starters so far, the only one who had a lower completion percentage was Chad Henne. So not a lot of confidence in Brady being shown across the fantasy landscape. Is there any way you start Kirk Cousins here, Mike?
No. I think Brady's going to finally turn the corner this week up against Oakland at home. I've mentioned this matchup before. I think if New England was going to have one of them games where they win 50-0, this is going to be that week. I'm not predicting that, obviously, but I think they are going to handle them pretty easily, and I think Brady's going to throw a couple touchdowns. So for me, I'm not quite in the Cousins bandwagon yet. I think this guy was awful his first 2 years. I never really understood the hype. Last week he looked good against Jacksonville. You know what? Robert Griffin III was on his way to a huge game early on before he got hurt. He looked great right out of the gate. So I'm sorry, but I'm not really buying on a big game against the Jags. So we'll see if he does it today. But for me, it's not even close. I'm going Tom Brady.
I agree. Even Brady shuts it down in the second half. The first half will have enough juice to squeeze out of this one. Cousins, we need to see it. This is kind of the definition of getting a little bit too cute. Even with a pretty good matchup against the Eagles' pass defense that struggled. I mean, I could see Cousins as a daily tournament play if you want to stack him with Garcon, because it looks like Deshaun Jackson's shoulder is going to at least hamper him. No, this is Brady.
Yeah, if you want to win those GPPs this week, that's a sneaky play. I don't know if I'm stacking with Garcon. I'm probably stacking with Niles Paul. FanDuel right now, $5,000. It's a nice little value out of him. Although it's not my stack play of the week. My stack play of the week, if you read my FanDuel column, Peyton Manning and Demaryius Thomas does not seem like it makes any sense whatsoever. But look at what they did in the Super Bowl. Nobody's playing them this week, and hey, it could pay off humongously. Then again, it's GPP, so you're going to strike out sometimes. So not the play for you guys doing 50-50s, double-ups, things like that. All right, and I have to agree with that. I've seen people pick up Cousins expecting him to be, borderline QB1. I think he's borderline QB2, and that's really where he stays, somewhere in that 24-25 range. I think it's going to show in this game against the Eagles this week, where the Eagles, I predict, go into halftime finally with a lead. Now, our buddy on Twitter, Buff Jackson, shot a tweet to all three of us, so I'll get definitely to his question here. He said, pick one out of these, and then he says possibly a flex over Hawkins. We'll get to that maybe in a second. Pick 1.5 PPR. It looks like he has Reggie Bush, Matt Asiata, Niall Davis, Chris Ivory, Terrence West. This is pretty easy, guys, right?
Who is it? Asiata West?
Asiata West, Chris Ivory, Reggie Bush, Niall Davis.
Oh, yeah. Niall Davis and easy.
Yep.
Yep, Niall Davis.
Now, would you flex any of those guys in a half PPR over Andrew Hawkins? And I think we probably would, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
I'd lean Asiata. I'd have no problem with West, but or at Bush, Asiata, they're all pretty close, but I have Asiata highest.
Yeah, I think I'd lean any of those four, including Ivory, over Hawkins. But I would probably go with West out of the other three.
Now, I just got another interesting, and I'm probably leaning Asiata there just to clear it, But again, you're not starting Hawkins there. But I did get an interesting question. Speaking of Niall Davis, and it always gets challenging, especially in PPR formats when we compare, wide receivers and running backs and who do we go. I think this one is kind of it's straightforward, but it does highlight a broader, maybe a broader question that we sort of were highlighting earlier. But I got to ask Niall Davis or Keenan Allen in the PPR. For me, I'm going to go Niall Davis here. I feel like, obviously we're going to see a lot of volume out of Davis. He's not necessarily the best running back. People say, oh, he looked awesome. He didn't really look that awesome in that game if you watch it a little bit closer, if you look at the numbers. But the guy runs angry, and you have to like that. And he's taken advantage of that opportunity. You don't have to be the best player on the field to be a good fantasy asset. But I guess in those sorts of situations, where do you draw the line? And is there any chance you're starting Allen over Niall Davis? So I'll toss that over to Mike. Mike, what are your general thoughts? Like, where's sort of the line for PPR wide receiver or running back in that flex spot?
Well, I think that it depends on the format. I mean, in standard, you can lean more towards running backs. I'm going to say 50-50. If you're talking PPR, you probably want a wide receiver in there. In leagues where you start 3 wide receivers, or actually 2, you probably want a wide receiver in there as well, maybe 1 or 2 running backs. So that's probably the line. But really, you just have to look also at opportunity, upside, where you have the guys ranked. I mean, in this case, Davis, obviously he's going to see a huge volume, probably borderline 25 touches, but it's a tough matchup against Miami. We know that. Still, I think he's going to see enough targets, enough scoring opportunity that he's a borderline running back one. Keenan Allen, I mean, going up against Buffalo, it's not going to be a walk in the park. They have a decent pair of corners. That being said, he's not, on top of that, I should say, he's also not 100%. I mean, it's possible he tweaks something and sits out the whole game. Do you really want to mess with that? I'd stay away from him where possible. I think he's probably best served, best treated as a wide receiver 3.
Yeah, fair enough. Pat, more of a philosophical question there, but do you have any thoughts on it?
No, I mean, kind of like what Mike said. You look at the opportunity, you look at the individual situation, you look at your projections. So it's not really a hard and fast rule whether I would go receiver or running back. It's definitely situation dependent. In this case, I'm with you guys, and we'll go with Davis.
All right, on Twitter we got another one, and guys, if you're watching on YouTube, we appreciate all the tweets. Definitely shoot them there. We're all monitoring our Twitter feeds as the show goes on. So from the very cleverly named The Reed Option, spelled like Andy Reid's last name, he says he's got a tough one in a standard league. He's trying to decide between Joyce Bell or Rashad Jennings. Rashad, no forced fumble Jennings. So who are you going to go with this one, Mike? I noticed, and I'll just throw this out there to kind of lead into you. You're projecting Jennings pretty high for this week, so maybe sort of thoughts behind the projection, and does that mean you're going with him over Joyce Bell?
Yeah, I do like Jennings. I'm gonna go with him over Bell. I mean, Houston has not stopped the run particularly well so far this season. They've of course been leading by a massive margin. In fact, so far they basically, in terms of game flow, they've been the most dominant team in the league so far. They've just had huge leads, and they've been riding out leads for a majority of their games. So teams haven't leaned heavily on the run against them. Whereas, Jennings, we know he's going to be the feature back. He's not performing particularly well, but neither is Andre Williams. He really has not a ton of competition, and Jennings is seeing a lot of targets as well. So, I think Jennings is a solid running back 1 option this week up against Houston. And, Bell, I'm struggling with him. I think because of what we've seen in terms of touches compared to Reggie Bush, he's clearly the lead back there. So he's in the running back 2 mix, but we've heard the chatter from Detroit. We've heard it from the coaches And we saw it last season that Reggie Bush probably is going to maybe get a few extra snaps, a few extra touches this week just because he was coming off a bit of a down week in that department. So that worries me about Bell a little bit, and it kind of separates Jennings from him. So I think Jennings is clearly the guy here.
Thoughts on that, Pat, at all?
Well, I'm with Mike and with on Jennings. I like both of them. I like Bell quite a bit this week as well. But just based on projected workload, Jennings seems to be the call even in standard. And they're both going to catch passes. I mean, Bell's had a surprising target volume as well. But in this one, both good options. Go with Jennings.
All right, another question that came to all three of us on Twitter. An interesting question at tight end. Okay, we have a banged-up Jordan Cameron or a frequently targeted Larry Donnell. Who's starting in this situation, Mike?
You said Cameron or Donnell. Close for me. I'm going to go with Jordan Cameron. I know he's not 100%, but it didn't really seem like his status was in doubt all week, so he's probably pretty close to it. And they absolutely need to get him the football a lot. So for me, it's tight, but I'm going to go with Jordan Cameron. And just kind of a side note before Pat jumps into it, Aaron Dobson, surprisingly inactive, seems to be they're going back and forth with Tompkins, Tompkins and Dobson for whatever reason. So it's very disappointing. And probably if you're stashing Dobson, you might as well go get another high appetite guy, get Moncrief with Nix maybe on defense, or if Devontae Adams is still sitting out there. So. Very disappointing that Dobson has
catchers, and especially if they get the lead as we expect them to. Minnesota's going to throw a lot of.
Right. Muting you there, Rick. Sorry about that. Pat, any thoughts on Donnell or Cameron? Are you going to go safer, or are you going to go for the high ceiling play?
No, I'm going to go with Cameron, especially if it's PPR. I don't know if you mentioned if it's one or the other, but I mean, Donnell's outplayed his expectation. Obviously, last week it was against Arizona. The first week, it was against a Detroit defense that was taking away everybody else. So I still need to see a little bit more. Maybe I'm just a little bit behind the curve on Donnell, but I think Cameron's going to obviously be the number one target, even over Hawkins, and so that's definitely the way I go.
Yeah, Donnell seems to be McAdoo's boy, so it's not going to shock me if he continues to see lots of targets. But obviously, Cameron, when on the field, is that even possibly in that elite tier of tight ends, if not right on the cusp of that elite tier with the big three. So certainly going to go with him as long as he's playing. We do have some questions, and we're coming down to crunch time here, 12 minutes to go in the show. With some questions, though, over on the chat side, our buddy Salvador, who's been hanging out with us today, is now got a PPR flex dilemma. Looks like he's got a choice between Michael Floyd, Kelvin Benjamin, Antonio Gates, or Donald Brown. So who are you going with that, or where are you going with that, Mike, with that particular dilemma?
Well, San Diego just announced Danny Woodhead as the starter there. That really makes no difference to me. Donald Brown is, going to be the guy that gets the bulk of the carries there, I think. Danny Woodhead, of course, will be heavily involved in passing downs, but don't forget Donald Brown. He's, one of them good, one of them three-way players. He's a decent runner. He's a really good pass blocker. He's a great pass catcher out of the backfield. So, I think that he's going to play a pretty significant role against Buffalo today, and because he does all those different things, I think that he's the guy here, even over a guy like Gates.
Yeah, I agree. You figure San Diego is going to be trying to control the clock like they had. Buffalo hasn't been running a lot of plays this year, so it kind of fits that script. Donald Brown is the call, even in PPR.
Yeah.
Really quick, let me. Sorry, Jeff. Let me jump in. If you guys are just watching on, not on, you're not asking questions, just watching. Shoot over to the YouTube link there, because we have some people complaining they're trying to get in to ask questions and they can't get in because we're full. So you can shoot over to YouTube. Do that. Thanks a lot.
And as we ask your questions, just duck out and shoot over there. We appreciate that. And I was just going to say that I do like Donald Brown as a player on our sponsor, DraftKings, this week. He's a nice, cheap option. If you want to make sure you get Calvin Johnson in your lineup, if you want to make sure you get Drew Brees in your lineup, you need to cut value somewhere, and Brown is a great option for that. All right, Joique Bell or Alfred Blue, now that the news is out about Arian Foster. In a non-PPR, Joique Bell or Alfred Blue?
Bell.
I'm going Bell too.
Pretty handily.
All right. So kind of just if you're watching, paying attention, you're starting to get a sense of where we are with blue. It's not that it's still not in that range of Overjoyed Bell. I get asked from America, is Matt Forte a must start? I'm just going to answer that for everybody. Yes. Rick hanging out with us saying that RBs are killing him with injuries. He needs an RB and one wide receiver. Alfred Blue, Crowell, Turbin, or C.J. Anderson are his choices at running back. Who are you starting out of that motley crew?
I guess we got to go blue for once.
Yeah, blue with that's actually not the worst thing there with with Foster out. So go blue.
Yeah, not too bad at all. Yeah, you're gonna play blue. He's gonna see the volume. Love Crowell's upside, but just certainly not going to see the volume that you want right here. Now, wide receiver, he says Brian. He says gives me Brandon. Does that mean Brandon Marshall? Quick, Reggie Wayne, and Michael Floyd. And I guess is he saying one?
Yeah, I think he might mean Brian Quick.
What's that?
He might mean Quick from the Rams.
Yeah, but it says Brandon, then it says Quick, Reggie. I guess is he saying Brian Quick? All right, so let's just like that. Brandon Quick, Brian Quick, Reggie Wayne, or Michael Floyd.
Wayne.
Yeah, Wayne. He's going up against Blackman in the slot. And Floyd is barely a wide receiver 3 with Stan.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with that one. It looks like Jimmy's asking me a question, doing some rapid fire here. Alfred Blue, and he says for either Lacey or Ellington, I don't know if this is a trade or if this means starting over. I guess we can approach it as both. If somebody's willing to give you Lacey or Ellington for Alfred Blue, don't even hesitate. Accept that now. But are you starting him over either? I'm saying no. Do you guys disagree?
No, I agree with both of those things that you just said. Trade him and don't start him over those guys.
Yep, you got it.
Get Lacey. God, boy. People freaking out all over the place. Tony Romo or Ryan Tannehill? Tannehill in a nice matchup this week. Romo disappointing so far this season. So who are we going there, Romo or Tannehill, Mike?
Yeah, I'm usually not too aggressive with quarterbacks, but I actually like Tannehill up against Kansas City. I think he's the nod this week.
Yeah, and I'm a Tony Romo guy, but in this instance, it's actually a question I had with one of my teams. I'm going with Tannehill. I think Dallas is going to try to run a lot. St. Louis is certainly going to try to run a lot. So there's not going to be a lot of snaps. There's not going to be a lot of throwing, most likely. And Tannehill's got a good matchup, like you guys mentioned.
Absolutely. All right. Do we have any news coming through, Mike, that you've been seeing? Anything big?
Nothing. As mentioned, Dobson out. I mean, all the inactives are pretty much in, and I think I mentioned them all. So nothing too shocking there.
Let me ask you this real quick, because I just saw that Allen Robinson is listed as the starter opposite Cecil Shorts. Obviously, Hearn's a little banged up. But just maybe your general thoughts on Robinson, for this week.
Does he get Vontae Davis this week? I think I saw that, which would be certainly negative.
Well, that's kind of tricky. I mean, what I was looking, with Cecil Shorts coming back and Marquise Lee, who was their slot guy, out, makes it a little bit tricky this week to decipher where they're going to be. Looking at Cecil Shorts' usage last year, he kind of leaned towards the left side, where his pass routes are. That's where Vontae Davis usually is. So I think Cecil Shorts is a guy that theoretically would see a high volume today, but with Vontae Davis there, maybe not so much. I think that Allen Robinson's going to be outside on the other side against Greg Toller. That's probably a little bit of a better matchup. Allen Hurns, he's not starting over Robinson. That tells me maybe he's not 100%. And frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if he kind of maybe rotates in with Shorts and Robinson, but doesn't play a lot because who plays in the slot there? I don't know. Those three guys are outside guys. I think you're going to see more than you'd like to see of Mike Brown today. I think he's going to be playing up against Darius Butler. Tough matchup there in the slot up against Indy today. So I would say if you could stay away from this wide receiver group, that's probably a good idea. Maybe Robinson and Shorts have a little bit of value inside the top 50, but I try to avoid.
All right, Rick had one other, and he was talking about Brian Quick, but he says start Cordero Patterson or Wes Welker. I think this one's pretty straightforward. As enticing as Welker can be, I'm going Patterson here. Do you guys agree with that one?
Agree.
Yes.
All right, then this one's a little bit tougher from Jimmy. Larry Fitzgerald, Jeremy Hill, or Justin Forsett. I don't have any information on whether or not this is a PPR. But again, going back to that, okay, we got wide receivers. It's really, I think we're going to toss Hill out of this one. So do we go Fitzgerald or Justin Forsett?
I like Fitzgerald. I like his matchup quite a bit. Mike already talked about it against Jimmy Ward. Stanton seemed to have an eye for him last week, and though Forsett's going to obviously get a good chunk of touches, I think Fitz is the way to go.
Yeah, I agree. It is tough just because running backs, add in maybe upwards of 15 carries to go with a handful of targets, where sometimes receivers get limited to only a few targets and don't get those carries. So sometimes it's hard when you're talking about a wide receiver 2 against a running back 2. But in this case, Fitzgerald, in terms of fantasy points per target so far, Jimmy Ward is the worst in the NFL so far through 2 weeks. In coverage, he is in we'll say it's the 77th percentile for Fitzgerald in terms of a positive matchup. So I think Fitzgerald, when he's in the slot, has an A-plus matchup, and I think you have to go with him just because he could have a huge day today.
Yeah, absolutely, and it was a half-point PPR or league there. Now, I did have a team defense question, and of course we have to give a little love to the team defenses. And I was asked, and it looks like we were all asked here on Twitter, Colts defense or the Ravens, and it's do we roll the dice on a Colts defense that isn't very good, or do we go with a Ravens defense that is very good but is not in the same exact matchup? Colts going against the Jaguars. I know it's a roll of the dice, but obviously if you pick them up because you didn't draft them, you're playing them. Why else would you have picked them up? So put them in. Roll the dice. Yeah, you could get a goose egg, but you could also easily get 20 points out of this one. I don't know who they're going to rush the passer with. Eric Walden, I guess. But after giving up 10 sacks last week, you can't really like the Jags for too much of a rebound on the offensive line. So you're going to start those guys there. Really no question about that one. And then those looking for maybe another player or two, if you picked up the Saints, it's the same scenario. You're starting the Saints. Why else pick them up other than to start them in a big game at home? Could see a lot of fireworks there, and a team coming off a letdown, just so far a letdown for the Saints, and expect some like I said, some big fireworks. It wouldn't surprise me if this is a game similar to what we saw on Thursday night. All right, Jimmy gives us one more question. We got 3 minutes left on the show here. Half-point PPR. Now he's asking, should he start Sammy Watkins over Forsett? And Jimmy, we're throwing Hill out of that one. We're not worried about Jeremy Hill there with Gio Bernard obviously getting a ton of touches. So Sammy Watkins or Justin Forsett after Watkins coming off that massive sort of breakout performance in week 2.
I think this is a lot closer. But Watkins looks like he's going to get a lot of Sharice Wright, who's one of the worst cornerbacks in the NFL, and obviously he's going to get, he's the apple of Manuel's eye at this point. So it's closer, but I'd still lean Watkins.
And it's against Bell, right? Joique Bell?
No, Justin Forsett.
Oh, Forsett. Okay. Well, that's not much of a difference. Yeah, I'm going to go with Watkins. I think I like him a lot this week, so I'm going to go for the high ceiling here, especially because, again, if Baltimore, it's kind of 50-50. If Baltimore gets ahead in this game early, you may see a lot of Talaferro running out the clock in that one. So I'm going to go towards Watkins because, he's already been a top 20 receiver through 2 weeks. There's no reason he can't do that again in a plus matchup. So I'm going there. Go high ceiling.
And let's not forget, he could have had 2 more touchdowns last week. That could have been, an absolutely massive week. You have to love the ceiling with Watkins. EJ may not be the best quarterback in the league, but he's going to look Watkins' way early and often. Now, that is going to do it for us for this week. So best of luck to everybody in Week 3. Enjoy it. And we'll be back here in Week 4 for another War Room. So for Pro Football Focus Fantasy, I'm with Mike Clay, Pat Thorman. I'm Jeff Ratcliffe. That's a wrap for us, folks.